Okay. Not in the right headspace. Yep. I did it. I bought a yukata. I thought I was only ever going to wear it for summer festivities, but being the hyper weeb that I am, I actually really like it. Really like just wearing it. It's super cool. I I don't think there's any hope for me. Anyway, story time. That's the reason you're here. So, today's story does continue from the previous story about the origins of the Fujiwara because we are dealing with some Fujiwara people primarily, specifically one guy. But the story does think that it's important that we know who this guy's ancestors are, who his dad is, and who his dad is, and all their brothers and stuff. You don't need to know their names, but because it's in the story, I'll put it in there anyway. So, the first guy the story talks about is Fujiwara no Fuyutsugu. Again, don't worry, you don't need to remember that name, but he's a Fujiwara guy. Again, he's a very powerful man. He's a Fujiwara, so second to none, very powerful, etc. And Fujiwara no Fuyutsugu had 4 children of note. Nagayoshi, his oldest, became a middle counselor, which was an okay rank. But his second son, Yoshifusa, again, you don't need to remember his name, became a grand counselor. That's what I translated it to. My translation might be off. A grand counselor, which is a really high rank. He's doing good for himself. Number 3, Fujiwara no Yoshimi became a left minister, which is again a good rank. Lastly, number 4, we have Yoshikado, who became a junior official of the palace. Again, I'm not entirely sure what all of these translations mean or if they're even accurate, but I translated them. I did my best. But this 4th child, Yoshikado, again, you don't need to worry about his name too much, but Yoshikado had a son by the name of Takafuji. Fujiwara no Takafuji. That is a name you gotta remember. Fujiwara no Takafuji. He's the main guy of the story today. So, Fujiwara no Takafuji, at the time of this story, was about 16 years old. And he was a big fan of falconry. Now, for those of you who don't know what falconry is, another term for it is hawking, because what you do is you go hunting, but instead of using a bow and arrow or a gun, they didn't have guns but at this time, but whatever. But instead of using a bow and arrow or whatever traps you train birds of prey to go attack and kill animals, and then you go and you pick it up after they're done killing it or holding it down. I actually was super into falconry when I was young, but being poor and having not very many resources, it was only ever a pipe dream. Maybe someday. So, if you guys make this channel super rich and famous, maybe I'll try falconry, because why not? If I have that much disposable income. Not likely. But anyway, young Takafuji decides one day that he wants to go on a falconry trip. So he gathers some of his mates together. They all head off into the wilds to a place called Minamiyamashina. The Minamiyamashina. It's a mouthful. But they're out hunting, having a good time. And I don't think the enjoyment so much is in the killing as it is in the we're hanging out, having a good time, getting away from the parents, out and about. Just, boys on the town, except they weren't on the town, they were out in the boonies. But they're out having a good time, and it ends up turning late afternoon-ish, when all of a sudden the wind picks up, and then it starts raining, and then it starts thundering and lightning, and this huge storm just comes sweeping in out of nowhere. So Takafuji and his retinue are now caught in this storm. They all come together because they need to find some way to get out of it. And they decide that the best course of action would be for everybody to just go their separate ways. Every man for himself. You go your way, I'll go my way, and we'll just find shelter, hunker down until the storm has passed. We'll reconvene here, and then we'll go home. So that's what they do. So Takafuji is riding a horse, and one retainer, one footman, so a guy that's on foot, comes with him. So Takafuji and this footman head off into the brush, and they start going west. And after traveling for a short distance, they come across a house. Very clearly a house. Now, it's out in the boonies, so it's not a very nice house. but at the very least, it's shelter from the elements. And as they get closer, Takafuji's looking at this house, and it's a fairly large house. It's got a nice cypress fence around it, and it's got this old Chinese-styled gate, so this house was built probably a few decades ago at the very least. And they cross right over this Chinese-style gate. They go into the grounds of the house, and there's this awning. Now, I'm not entirely sure about the details of this part of the story. The translation didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I think you need to understand old Japanese architecture to really get it. But there's some kind of like an awning, an overhang, that Takafuji and his man decide to go sit under. And that's what they do. And the footman, after they get into some shelter, the footman takes the horse and leads the horse somewhere else, somewhere safe, but also so they have more space under this limited shelter that they have luckily stumbled upon. But the footman takes the horse away and comes back, and Takafuji and his man are just kind of sitting there, waiting the storm out. But the storm isn't calming down. In fact, it might be getting worse. It's just raining and thundering and lightninging, and what's more concerning is the sun starts setting. So not only is now there a big storm, but it's getting dark. And they were hoping that the storm would pass fairly quickly, which does happen fairly regularly in Japan. I can attest to this. But this storm is sticking around, and it's getting dark. So these two men are starting to get understandably very worried that they may be out all night. How are they going to get back? What if the storm doesn't pass? What's going to happen to them? So they're just, nervous. They're out in the middle of nowhere. They've never been here. And they're from the capital. Like, they're not super hardcore survivalists. They don't know where they are. They don't know whose house they've just intruded upon. All sorts of things up in the air. And so they're hanging out, getting worried, when they hear noise behind them. They turn around, and out pops, from the house that they're kind of, sort of, in, but not really, out pops this middle-aged man, dressed in blue robes, about 40 years old or so. Most likely the guy who owns the house. But he pops out, and he asks them, who goes there? Who are you? What are you doing? Who are you? Why are you here? Now, Takafuji, being the guy in charge, technically, he turns around and he basically just says, how are you doing, sir? Apologies. We were out hunting when this storm whipped up, and we have just been looking for a place to take shelter. We didn't have anywhere else to go. We saw your house, and we figured that we could borrow your roof for just a little bit. And the old man just kind of nodded his head and said, okay. Yeah, I mean, you're welcome to stay right here for the duration of the storm. Rest easy. You're welcome under this part of the roof, essentially. He just says, you're good to stay. You're good to stay for a while. And then, maybe to some appeal to hospitality, or because he wants to know who these guys who are under his roof are, he approaches the footman, because in ancient Japan, technically, it's custom to approach a nobleman from his servants as opposed to him directly. So, this old man comes to Takafuji's footman and asks, who's your lord? Where are you guys from? Just, trying to make some small talk, trying to make light of the dark situation. And Takafuji's footman says, this is Lord Fujiwara no Takafuji, son of so-and-so, the holder of this position and that position, and blah, 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 whatever, first of his name, mother of dragons, and whatever, all of the things that the old people used to go on in ancient times, right? Full-on, whatever. And the old man all of a sudden springs up after hearing it. He's like, oh, shoot, and he just disappears into his house. He's just gone. So the two men are like, oh, huh? That's a little weird. And all of a sudden they start hearing movement from inside the house. Things being moved around. They start seeing candles being lit. And they realize this man is now preparing the inside of his house. He's cleaning it up. He's fixing it up. So after a few minutes of hearing preparation noises, the old man comes back out. And this time, instead of just being like a casual bro about everything, now he's adopting an attitude of obeisance, of humility. And he says, forgive me, my lord, I had no idea who you were. If I had known who you were, I definitely would not have kept you in such a shabby state. By all means, please, I have prepared my home. Please take residence in my home. Relax. Take off your wet clothes. I will have them dried by our fire. I will have your horse fed and watered. And I want to make you as comfortable as I possibly can while you stay here in my lowly abode. Now, this was great news, because the two men, up until this point, were wondering if they were going to have to wait out the storm in this shabby, open to the elements kind of area that wasn't comfortable at all. But now they're going to get to stay under a roof. And so the old man ushers them in. And Takafuji and his footmen, they're from the capital, right? They're from the classy areas. They know fine dining, as it were. And so this house was not like super fancy. They had seen much nicer houses, but it had a really rustic charm to it that Takafuji especially was just very appreciative of. He noticed that everything was nice, tidy, and orderly. There was very interesting wicker work on the ceiling. And there are 3 or 4 Korean-style tatami mats just laid out so that the men could lay down and stretch themselves out. You know, just relax. And of course, it was a huge relief for Takafuji to be able to take off his wet clothing that had just been soaked. Apparently, they've got multiple layers of clothing, so not all of it was quite wet. But he takes off the wet clothing, and the old man comes, picks it up, and takes it off to some area where they have a fire to dry. So Takafuji and his men are reclining, they're enjoying themselves, they're drinking in the rustic atmosphere of this place, and Takafuji's just kind of looking around casually, just seeing the sights, enjoying the view, when he looks over to a set of doors that are open. And these doors lead out to the veranda. And then something catches his eye. A young girl, maybe a year younger than him, out on the veranda, wearing a light-colored kimono against really dark-colored hakama, which are like samurai pants, a big poofy pleated pants. I think they're really cool looking, but anyway. And with one hand, she's hiding her face with a fan, because again, in ancient Japan, women were not supposed to show themselves to men whom they were not related to. So with one hand, she's got a fan hiding her face. With another hand, she's holding a small serving table. It's kind of like this tray with legs on it. And the whole time, she's sitting there, she's watching the two men, but she's being kind of bashful about it, She's kind of like stealing glances at them, specifically at Takafuji. But she's also averting her gaze and kind of turning her head all shyly like, which, if you read The Tale of Genji or any classical Japanese work about love and the relationships between men and women, this was a very, very attractive way to behave. It's very adorable, but in a kind of that kind of way, if you know what I mean. So Takafuji, being a nobleman and used to having his way, he sees this girl and he says, "Hey, come over here for a second. Come here." So she was probably kneeling at that point, doing a proper sitting, the seiza, where she's kneeling. But in this one graceful move, without removing the fan from her face, and still holding this table in her hands, she stands up and just like glides over to them. And while she's moving over, and she's getting closer, and Takafuji can see more of her, he notices that the parts of her face that he can see is really good looking. And he also notices that she's got this long, dark, elegant, flowing hair, which was very attractive in ancient Japan. And he was kind of taken aback because the way she looked and the way she moved and behaved, she seemed almost like she was from somewhere with much, much more class than this, nice but kind of rustic looking place, And he also noticed that on this serving table, there were a bunch of different instruments of food. There were a bunch of serving implements packed to the brim with all of this delicious looking and delicious smelling food, along with a pair of chopsticks just kind of, on this table. So the young lady sets this before Takafuji and quickly just retreated into the next room, turned around and glided again, just like she did, into the next room. And as she was leaving with her back turned, Takafuji does one of those things, except this girl was wearing ancient Japanese women's clothing, so it's not like it complemented her figure or anything. But he noticed from the back how long her hair actually was and how beautifully it flowed and how thick it was and how it went all the way, it went past her knees, it was so long, which again is very, very attractive to the ancient Japanese. But over the course of the next, little while, this girl would come back and forth bringing them food, and she brought all sorts of food, all sorts of delicious food. Now, it wasn't, again, fine dining per se. It wasn't the nicest food that the two men had ever had, but it was good food, and it was a welcome relief because they had been out hunting all day, probably hadn't had anything to eat in hours. So they'd get to relax, they'd got to take off their wet clothes, there's a really attractive girl, and now they're enjoying some delicious home-cooked meals. Like, this is a good turn of events. And to top it all off, After they got done eating, they were presented with some very, very fine sake. They got to wash down their meal with something to drink, and it was just all around, it was just a good time. And after all this, and now it's late, time to turn in. Let's go to bed. So they do. Everyone goes their separate ways. Takafuji and his man are sleeping in the same room. And Takafuji lays down and he tries to go to sleep, but he can't. He can't for a couple of reasons. One, again, he's a nobleman. He's not used to spending the night away from home out in some country home that he's never been. Like, he doesn't know if maybe these guys are serial killers that are just like buttering him and his man up and they're just going to slit their throats in the middle of the night and steal all their stuff, you know? And there's still a storm raging, which is already kind of freaky too. And he's just in a strange place. He's never been in this situation. So he's worried and concerned. But he was also preoccupied with the image of that girl. It was all he could think about. She was so gorgeous. Like, oh my gosh, who was she? Where did she come from? Why is she here? Why is she so good looking? You know, typical 16-year-old inner monologuing. But not wanting to sleep alone, and being a nobleman, he decided he was going to call her to him, if you know what I mean. And, you know, this is ancient Japan, again, different set of values, and she seemed to be happy with it too, so, again, not endorsing anything here, just, it is what it is. But he calls her to him, and she comes, and he takes her in his arms, and he lays down with her, right? And having her close to him, having her this close and getting a nice close-up look, this time she doesn't have a fan. It's dark though, so I don't know how much he can see. But having her so close, she's even more lovely than when he was noticing her at a distance. She's gorgeous. She's absolutely amazing. So Takafuji, he doesn't sleep at all, obviously. Instead, he and this girl spend their night together, pledging their love. And again, if you read something like The Tale of Genji or other Japanese romances, pledging one's love, well, you're the internet, you know what I mean. And then dawn came. And again, I have to explain a little bit of Japanese tropes here, Japanese romance tropes, because this is a romance story. So, even among married couples, the tradition is that the man did not live with the woman. If a man and a woman got married, the man still technically had his own house and the woman lived at her parents' house. And the man was supposed to come and he would spend the night with his lady. And then before dawn comes, he was supposed to get up and leave and go to work or go to court or do whatever he was supposed to do. But dawn is a time of parting. It's a time of bittersweet lovers going their separate ways for the day. And even if you weren't married, this was still the same tradition, because this is how you got married, is a man would send letters to a lady of interest. She would respond and say something to the effect of, ooh, I'm interested, but they would do it in this artistic, poetic way where they would skirt around the topic. And then the man would come at night, and they would pledge their love. And then in the morning, the man would leave. So again, that's what's happening here. So it's a very, very beautiful, very artistic, very tender moments going on here, is what I'm trying to get at. So dawn comes, and Takafuji says, you know, because it's morning now and he has to get back home. His dad's probably worried, freaking out. Where is he? Where is it? Everyone's probably freaking out. He's got to go. So he tells her, he says, unfortunately, I have to leave. I don't want to, but I've got to. And he unfastens, because they didn't tuck their swords into their obis. They didn't do like this. They actually had it tied back then. But he unfastens his sword and he hands it to her. And he says, keep this as a token of me. And if your father ever tries to marry you off to any other man, show him this sword and tell him, no, this man said he would come back for me. And saying thus, he and his man, they make preparations, they get ready, they put all their clothes back on. Their horse, which has now been rested, fed, and watered, and is good to go, they pack up everything, and they take off. And the whole while Takafuji is leaving, he's just constantly looking back at her, because he doesn't want to, like, he needs to leave, but he doesn't want to leave her. She has smitten him to the very core. He's head over heels for her. And then, of course, after some traveling, they meet up with all of their hunting buddies again, and they all go off to the capital. And they arrive home, safe and sound. Now, Takafuji's dad had been worried that whole day. Previous all night and most of that day, he had been so worried. What happened to my son? Where did he go? He just disappeared. Now, when Takafuji shows up, his dad is so relieved. He's just overjoyed. He's like, oh my gosh, I was so worried. Something had happened to you. Thank heavens you're back safe and sound. But, true to dad format, he instantly jumps into a lecture. He says, you know, son, I understand. You're 16 years old. You want to go have fun with your friends, hang out with your friends. And I myself, I loved falconry too. I loved doing exactly what you just did. However, this latest development has made me question whether or not it's safe to trust you with your freedom for now. So, unfortunately, I hate to do this to you, son, but I am going to forbid you going out falconrying, hawking, henceforth, until further notice. And just like that, Takafuji's hawking expeditions came to a close. None of his hunting buddies were aware of what had happened that night with Takafuji. Only the footmen that went along with him knew what had happened. And the thing is because this girl was a nobody, technically. She wasn't a noblewoman. She was just some peasant girl living out in the middle of nowhere. And because of the way the aristocratic people of ancient Japan thought, he couldn't just go and tell everybody what happened. That would be kind of a scandal. Like, oh my gosh, Takafuji, one of the Fujiwara man, just hooked up with some random peasant chick from the middle of nowhere? For shame! Is kind of how they probably would have reacted. So Takafuji could only talk about this with his footman, and he can't go see this girl. He can't just up and tell his dad, hey, Dad, I met this girl out in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to go see her again. No. If he wanted to do that, he's going to have to come up with some kind of pretense. But the only pretense, the only reason anybody would want to go out that direction would be to go hunting, which he's not allowed to do anymore. So he's in trouble. And the only guy he can talk to is his footman, his loyal servant that went with him and saw the whole thing. Except his servant got called to go back to his home province, also out away from the capital. So now, Takafuji not only can't see this girl, he has nobody to talk to about it. And so, several years pass, like maybe 4 years or so pass, and Takafuji just kind of in this perpetual depression. Like he's just bummed out beyond words because he met the love of his life and now he can't see her. He has no way to even talk about it. No way to send messages to her because the only person who knew where she lived that could potentially go send letters to her is now gone. He's back home. Where is home? I don't know. Doesn't mention it. So 4 years pass and Takafuji's dad dies. Now this is kind of a big deal because Takafuji's dad is the one who paid for Takafuji's life. It was under his dad's house that he lived, gave him food, clothing, education, all that stuff. But now his dad's dead, so who's going to support him? Well, Takafuji does go to his uncle's house, and his uncle, after seeing that this kid is smart, he's good looking, he's got a lot of really good prospects, he takes the kid under his wing and says, you know what, I will financially back you, I'll make sure everything's taken care of, and the unspoken rule is that if somebody financially backs you, you are supposed to go represent their interests at court. And so the uncle, seeing Takafuji as a good representative for his interests, decides, hey, I'll take this kid on, I'll make sure everything's taken care of for him. But another year or two pass, and again, even though Takafuji now can go out hunting, he can't just go see this girl because he's a nobleman. He's got things to do. Until Takafuji's old footman comes back to the capital. Takafuji hears about this and immediately calls him. He says, hey, come here. Come hang out. Sends a letter to him, says, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. So they meet together, and Takafuji, trying to be discreet about it, asks the footman, he says, hey, do you remember 6 years or so ago? We got caught up in that storm when we stayed at that house. Do you remember that? And the footman said, of course I do. Takafuji is like, oh, great, he remembers. Oh, this is amazing. Takafuji tells him, hey, I want to go back there. I'm planning a hunting trip for this express purpose. But I want you to come with me since you are the only other one who knows about this. Will you come with me? And do you remember the way? And the servant man says, yes, I remember the way, and I would love to attend you, my lord. So they wasted no time. They got everything together. They got their hunting gear. And they also brought one other really stout, strong, sturdy warrior type because, never know if you're going to run into trouble along the road. So they set out in the morning, and by the time they got to their destination, the sun was already setting. Now, when they had arrived, it was early spring, and the scene that awaited them was like out of a fairy tale. So again, you have this nice, cozy-looking rustic house, and there's plum blossoms scattering to and fro in the breeze, there was an uguisu, a warbler, which is a very famous motif of spring in classical Japanese poetry. There is a warbler singing in the trees, and it is a very beautiful song. Again, I can tell from experience it's a very pretty song. And they're noticing how the plum blossoms are like floating on this stream that they're just now noticing. This really elegant, fine-looking stream, and it's just this picturesque scene of rustic life in Japan. And just like before, the men ride through the Chinese-style gate, but this time, instead of just immediately hanging out underneath the awning or whatever, Takafuji says one of his men ahead to announce his presence as is the proper way to do things. Now, the man of the house, the old man from last time, when he heard this, he couldn't believe it. He was so shocked, because what was most likely going through his head is that he did this random nobleman a service, and this nobleman accepted his hospitality and had his way with his daughter, and then just up and left, because scumbags do that, and a lot of people are scumbags. So this old man is probably assuming that as the years pass, that he would never ever see this nobleman again. He would never show up. So, after 6 years, suddenly he does show up. And again, this is good news, because the way it worked in ancient Japan is if a man married a daughter, he would go to his now parents-in-law house. He would go to his father-in-law's house, and he would mingle with them, and he would represent their interests in court. And, having a connection like that would help further one's station in life. You could have money for times of hardship, and it would increase your rank. Like, this was a really good thing to happen, not just to this man's daughter, who is now going to be the wife of a nobleman, but also to her family. They were going to reap benefits too. So this man probably was just assuming he was never going to see Takafuji ever again. But lo and behold, here he is. So he's ecstatic, and he immediately comes running, and he presents himself before Takafuji and says, "Hello, my lord, I'm so glad to see you." And Takafuji immediately asks, "Is your daughter home?" To which the man eagerly replies, "Yes, yes, of course. I will take you to her right now." He leads Takafuji into the room that his daughter is in, and he sees this girl again. This time she's halfway hidden behind a screen. Not fully, but she's halfway hidden behind a screen, and Takafuji notices that she's even more beautiful now than she was before. Whereas when she was, 15 or so, she still had this girlish charm about her. Now she's lost that girlish charm and it's been replaced with this full-flowered, womanly gorgeousness, is what we could call it, let's say that. And she was so stunning, she almost seemed like a different person. And it made Takafuji wonder, how is it possible that someone so beautiful could actually be real? This just seems kind of insane. When all of a sudden, a little girl comes running out, about 5 or 6 years old. And this little girl is also a gorgeous little girl. Not in the same way, but even being just, a 6-year-old or however old she was, she had this radiance, this air of nobility about her that was almost unworldly. It was kind of strange. And Takafuji sees this little girl, and he's fearing the worst because he hasn't seen this woman in years. And her being as beautiful as she is, word surely has gotten around everywhere else, has gotten around the area, and she certainly had other men who were probably chasing after her. Takafuji fears the worst, and assumes that this is probably some other dude's daughter. I mean, it couldn't be his. Obviously, he only spent one night with her. There's no way. It's probably some other dude's, and so he's worried that she has maybe been married off, or she's been having fun with some of the other dudes around town. He turns to this woman and asks her, "Who's this little girl?" And she breaks down into tears. She can't speak because she just cries. And so, not getting any answers from her, he turns to her dad. He says, "Hey, I tried asking your daughter, but she's just crying. Who's this little girl?" He says, "My lord, sir, for a whole year after you left, I did not let any other suitors enter my house, nor did I send my daughter off to anybody after that. I know for a fact, this little girl here, this girl is yours. She's your daughter." And so Takafuji's just mind is blown with this revelation. Again, he can't believe it. There's no way. There's no way this is actually happening. He has a daughter? Since when? What? He's just stunned. And so he's just kind of looking around, trying to process this whole thing, and his eyes fall on the woman's pillow. And right next to her pillow is the sword that he left her. And now his mind was blown before, but now it's been like nuked. Okay? Boom. And he can only think there's got to be some kind of like karmic connection, something going on from a previous life. This is like a fairy tale. This is insane. Holy crap. So needless to say, Takafuji was in no hurry to get home. He wanted to spend some time with his woman that he was going to make his wife, who was basically his wife, and now his firstborn daughter. He's just stoked, out his mind. So he decides to spend the whole night there, probably pledging his love. It doesn't mention, it just says he spends the night there. Again. And again, dawn comes, morning comes, the time of parting for lovers. And as they're getting ready to leave, Takafuji turns around and he tells the man and his now wife, hey, look, I know what happened last time, but I promise you, I'm going to come back for you. I'm not going to take years like last time. Just give me a few days to go back home, to take care of some things, and then I'm going to come back for you and make sure you're taken care of. I promise this time. And so, with many backwards glances, again, Takafuji goes back home. Now, on the road back home, Takafuji turns to his servant boys, servant men. They're men, big manly men. And he asks them, hey, do you have any information on the guy who owns the house? Who is he? Where's he from? What's his name? And Takafuji's footman answers, his name is Miyaji no Iyamasu, and he's the leader of the nearby village. He's just a village head, which is cool. I mean, he's still a peasant, but, he's not like a super peasant. He's a peasant, but he's still technically a nobody, which is kind of weird that all of this happens because the nobility doesn't normally have reason to mingle with the riffraff. And yet, not only has he mingled with the riffraff because of circumstance, but he's fallen in love with one of the riffraff, he's had a child by one of the riffraff. Clearly, there's some sort of deep karmic bond between them, some events in a previous life, something drawing them together. This is fate, is what he's starting to think. And far be it from Takafuji to tell fate to go shove off. So Takafuji goes home, and he makes preparations to bring this woman and her daughter and his daughter to the capital. The only problem is they're not from the capital, and the capital people can be snooty and arrogant and mean and backbiting and nasty, especially to somebody who's not one of the good people. So he decides that he needs to bring somebody from their house to come with them to keep them company. But he can't ask his wife's dad. He can't ask his father-in-law to come because his father-in-law has responsibilities to the house. He's got responsibilities to the village. So instead, he has his mother-in-law attend his wife and his daughter. And so Takafuji suddenly had 3 generations of women move into a house in the capital. And he considered them his treasures. His wife and her family, he absolutely adored them. They were his treasures, is what the story says. And he was soon blessed by 2 more treasures in the form of 2 new boys. He had 2 sons by this woman. And as time passed, Takafuji's reputation, his power, his wealth, his influence, he began to prosper like nobody else. He very soon became a grand counselor, so that's a high position. That's really high. His firstborn daughter, the one that he saw in the house, eventually went into palace service. Now, if a woman goes into palace service, that basically means she's going to be a concubine of the emperor. Meaning, even though she's not technically going to be the emperor's main wife, she's going to pledge her love to the emperor many times. Specifically, she went into the service of Emperor Uda, and by him, she eventually had a prince who would someday become Emperor Daigo. So, Takafuji not only increases in prosperity, but he now has a grandson who is emperor, and that's some power. Now, his 2 boys also rose to great heights in government. His firstborn son, Fujiwara no Sadakuni, also followed in his father's footsteps and eventually became a grand counselor. And his younger son, Fujiwara no Sadakata, became a minister of the right, which is also a really high rank position. It's not quite super high up there. It's not like the highest, but it's up there. Now, Takafuji's father-in-law was, the village leader, the nobody, was immediately brought to the nobility of the 4th rank. And the way it worked in ancient Japan is you had, I believe it was 12 ranks of nobility, the top rank being the imperial family. And then you had rank 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way down. Now, once you hit rank 6, so halfway between there, once you hit rank 6, 6 and up was considered high nobility. So Takafuji's father-in-law, his wife's dad, immediately was granted the 4th rank of nobility. So he just, boom, shoots up in the social ladder like a rocket, just straight up there. And for the last thing in rank, once Emperor Daigo took the throne, so Takafuji's grandson, once Emperor Daigo took the throne, he turned around and made Takafuji, his grandfather, Minister of the Interior. If you remember, I said one of Takafuji's sons became Minister of the Right. And the way it worked is, on paper, the Minister of the Right and Left were equal, but in actuality, the Minister of the Left had more power. But on paper, the Minister of the Interior was literally the highest position you could ever have. Now, it largely became a ceremonial position, but Emperor Daigo made Fujiwara no Takafuji Minister of the Center, which is, again, mind blown. Literally, this man has now ascended to the highest possible heights that is possible for somebody who's not a member of the imperial family to actually rise to. So Takafuji's father-in-law's house was eventually converted into a temple, so that's nice. Give it a little bit more significance, so now it will be preserved for generations. A temple known as Konjuji Temple. Takafuji's wife, the really gorgeous woman, had another temple built on the other side of the mountain that she lived right next to. And that temple is known as Oyakedera Temple. And Emperor Daigo, so an emperor, who obviously thought very fondly of his humble origins and the peasant class of his family, actually had his tomb made in that area. And that's where he was laid. That's where he was laid to his final rest. Sorry, we're not talking about bug spray. And so, this story ends by pointing to the machinations of karma, as it were. Here we have a man who was a middling noble, as a young boy, stumbled upon a house just because of a storm. He went on a whim, decided to go hunting because of a storm, stayed at a place he normally would never have been, and all of that was one big chain reaction, because that's what karma means, is like a chain reaction of events that led to Takafuji becoming one of the most powerful men in the world, an emperor's reign, and a house prospering like almost no other had ever come before, all because of seemingly insubstantial events. Thus, it is said that this family had a very, very deep karmic bond. Okay, that's going to do it. I actually really like this story. I'm a sucker for a good romance, and this is, by all accounts, a very good romance. I'm a big fan of The Tale of Genji, which I'm currently reading, attempting to read in classical Japanese. It's a doozy, but this is a very good story. I appreciate it, and I appreciate you for coming on and listening to yet another video. And hopefully, I'll see you in the next one. That's going to be it for now, and see you around. And I probably won't be wearing this next time, because I'm a weeb, but moderation in all things, I can't go overboard. Or maybe I can. Anyway, bye.